The crystal spires of the Valtorian palace pierced the twilight sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting 3 moons that hung in perfect alignment. Marcus had seen many wonders since arriving on this alien world, but nothing prepared him for the sheer vastness of the royal complex. Every corridor seemed to stretch into infinity, every door identical to the last, and the directions he'd been given might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit for all the good they did him. He was exhausted. 3 days of standing guard during peace negotiations had drained him in ways combat never had. At least in battle, you knew where you stood. Here, every word carried hidden weight. Every gesture could spark an incident. The war between Earth and the Valtorian Empire had ended 6 months ago, but the wounds were still fresh, still bleeding. Marcus carried his own scars, visible and otherwise. He just wanted to find his quarters and sleep. The hallway he'd turned down looked promising. The human delegation was supposedly housed in the West Wing, 3rd level, rooms marked with blue crystalline symbols. Or was it the East Wing? 4th level? The briefing had been hours ago, and Marcus's mind had been elsewhere, lost in memories he'd rather forget. He stopped at a door that seemed right. The symbol above it was bluish. Close enough. His hand moved to the access panel, and to his surprise, it opened immediately. The Valtorians must have keyed all the delegation rooms to human biometrics. Marcus stepped inside and froze. This was definitely not his room. The chamber before him was enormous. Easily 10 times the size of any quarters a bodyguard would be assigned. Gossamer curtains in shades of deep purple and silver hung from a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. The walls were lined with shelves holding artifacts Marcus couldn't begin to identify crystalline sculptures. Books bound in materials that shifted color. Small orbs that contained what looked like captured starlight. But what stopped his breath entirely was the wall directly across from the entrance. There, in a frame of polished white metal that seemed to glow with its own light, hung a photograph. Not a Valtorian artifact, not an alien image, but a distinctly human military photograph. His photograph. Marcus felt his heart stutter. He took 3 steps forward without meaning to, drawn by the impossibility of what he was seeing. It was his face, younger by 5 years, hair cut military short, expression serious, but not quite hardened yet. The photo from his enlistment papers. He'd been 27, fresh from training, still believing war could be righteous. How was this here? Why was this here? His mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Was this some kind of intelligence file? A target profile? Had they been monitoring him specifically? But that didn't explain the frame, the careful placement, the way it was displayed with almost ... reverence. You shouldn't be here. Marcus spun, his hand instinctively moving toward the weapon he wasn't carrying. Standing in the doorway to an adjacent room, backlit by soft amber light, was someone he recognized immediately, despite having only seen her from a distance during formal proceedings. Princess Aveline, first heir to the Valtorian throne. She wasn't wearing the elaborate, ceremonial armor he'd seen her in during the negotiations. Instead, she wore a simple flowing gown in shades of deep blue, her silver-white hair loose around her shoulders. Her skin had the characteristic luminescence of her people, a soft glow that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Her eyes, large and the color of amethyst, were fixed on him with an expression he couldn't read. Marcus's throat went dry. He'd just been caught trespassing in a royal chamber. This could destroy the fragile peace his people had worked so hard to achieve. He started, his voice rough. I apologize, Your Highness. I was looking for my quarters. The palace is... I made a mistake. Aveline didn't move. Her gaze shifted from him to the photograph on the wall, then back. You saw it? She said softly. It wasn't a question. Marcus couldn't lie. Yes. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Aveline took a step into the room, her movements graceful despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. She was tall for her species, nearly matching his height, and carried herself with the unconscious authority of someone born to rule. "I suppose you're wondering why your image is in my private chambers," she said. And there was something in her voice, vulnerability mixed with defiance, that caught him off guard. "The thought crossed my mind," Marcus managed. His military training screamed at him to apologize again, to leave immediately, to report this incident. But his feet wouldn't move. Aveline walked closer to the photograph, her fingers trailing along the frame's edge. "This picture came into my possession 4 years ago, during the height of the war. A reconnaissance report from the Battle of Kretos." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. Kretos. He remembered that battle. Remembered the screaming, the fire, the way the sky had turned red with burning ships. He'd lost half his unit that day. "Our intelligence officers compiled profiles of enemy combatants," Aveline continued, her voice distant. "They showed me hundreds of faces, telling me these were the monsters destroying our worlds. They wanted me to hate, to see humans as nothing more than a plague to be eradicated." She turned to look at him, and Marcus saw something raw in her expression. "But then I saw your picture, and I couldn't reconcile what they told me with what I saw in your eyes." "What did you see?" Marcus heard himself ask, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Aveline's hand remained on the frame, trembling slightly. Sadness, weariness, not the face of a monster, but of someone who'd lost something precious. Someone who was tired of losing. She paused, her luminescent eyes searching his face. "I asked for the full report on you. Learned that you'd volunteered for the riskiest missions, the ones that saved civilians. That you'd carried wounded enemies to safety when you could have left them to die. That despite everything, you still fought with honor." Marcus's chest tightened. He remembered those missions, remembered making choices that his superiors had called foolish. He'd saved Valtorian civilians because they were people, not because of any grand moral calculation. He'd done it because leaving them felt wrong, even when wrong would have been easier. "I kept this photograph," Aveline said quietly, "because it reminded me that we were fighting people, not demons. That somewhere on the other side of this war, there were individuals who still carried their humanity. It became..." She hesitated, color deepening in her cheeks. "It became important to me. A reminder that peace might still be possible." Marcus didn't know what to say. The revelation was too much, too strange, too intimate coming from an alien princess he'd never spoken to before. "You kept a picture of an enemy soldier," he said slowly, "as..." "What? Inspiration?" "As hope," Aveline corrected softly. "And perhaps ... double quotes," she trailed off, looking away. "Perhaps what?" She met his eyes again, and Marcus saw vulnerability there that made his breath catch. "Perhaps because even then, looking at your face brought me a strange kind of comfort. I told myself it was merely symbolic, that it represented the possibility of peace between our peoples. But I think, even then, some part of me knew it was more than that." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Marcus knew he should leave, knew this conversation was veering into territory that could have catastrophic consequences. But he couldn't seem to make his legs work. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Aveline smiled, sad and beautiful. "Because you're here. Because fate or chance brought you to my door, and perhaps that means something. And because..." She took a breath. "Because keeping secrets has become exhausting. And you deserve to know that your image, your memory, helped end this war. You helped me believe peace was worth fighting for." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, some barrier he'd built after too many losses, too many battles. He'd spent 5 years as a weapon, telling himself that feeling nothing was survival. But standing here, looking at this alien princess who'd kept his photograph like a talisman, he felt human again. Vulnerable again. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Adeline replied. I needed you to know. Before the summit ends, and you return to Earth. Before I never had the chance to tell you. But before Marcus could respond. Before he could process the weight of what she'd revealed. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Aveline's eyes widened in alarm. "The evening patrol," she whispered urgently. "If they find you here," she didn't need to finish. Marcus understood immediately. A human guard in the princess's private chambers would look like espionage at best, an assassination attempt at worst. It would shatter the peace treaty before the ink dried. "Is there another way out?" Marcus asked, his military training kicking in. Aveline grabbed his hand. Her skin was warmer than he expected, and the contact sent electricity through his arm and pulled him toward the far wall. She pressed her palm against what looked like solid crystal, and a section slid open, revealing a narrow servant's passage. "This leads to the gardens," she said quickly. "Follow it down 2 levels, then take the left fork. You'll come out near the human delegation wing." Marcus hesitated at the threshold, looking back at her. At this impossible woman who'd kept his picture, who'd seen something in him worth remembering. "Thank you," he said, inadequate but sincere. Aveline's expression softened. "Marcus," she said, using his name for the first time, and hearing it in her melodic accent did something to his heart. If ... if circumstances were different. If we were different people. She didn't finish, but Marcus understood. "I know," he said softly. The footsteps were closer now. Marcus slipped into the passage, and the crystal wall closed behind him, leaving him in darkness. But even as he made his way through the hidden corridor, even as he tried to process what had just happened, one truth burned in his mind. He'd spent 5 years trying to forget the war, trying to bury who he'd been and what he'd done. But in one impossible conversation, Princess Aveline had reminded him that some part of him was still worth remembering, worth keeping. And as he emerged into the moonlit gardens, breathing hard, Marcus realized something terrifying. He wanted to see her again, wanted to know her beyond this single strange encounter, wanted to understand why her keeping his photograph felt like both a gift and a promise. Behind him, the palace loomed, full of secrets and impossibilities. Somewhere inside, a princess looked at a photograph and remembered hope. And for the first time in years, Marcus let himself feel something beyond duty and survival. He let himself feel hope too. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in his actual quarters, a modest room that he'd eventually found with help from another guard staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of his encounter with Princess Aveline. Her voice, her eyes, the way she'd looked at his photograph with such tenderness. The feel of her hand in his, warm and electric, as she'd pulled him toward safety. He told himself it meant nothing. That she was a princess, he was nobody, and their worlds were separated by more than just a species. That she'd kept his photo as a symbol, not because of any real connection. That he was romanticizing what had been a diplomatic embarrassment, narrowly avoided. But his heart wouldn't listen to reason. The next morning, Marcus reported for duty with shadows under his eyes. The human delegation was scheduled for another day of treaty negotiations, and he'd be standing guard outside the council chambers for hours. Mind-numbing work, which was usually a blessing. Today, he wasn't sure his mind could handle much more activity. "You look terrible," Jasmine said as she took her position beside him. She was the other bodyguard assigned to their delegation, sharp-eyed, quick-witted, and far too perceptive for Marcus's comfort. "Didn't sleep well?" Marcus muttered. "Palace too luxurious for you?" Or are you still brooding about Elena? The mention of his sister's name sent a familiar spike of pain through his chest. Elena had died at Kratos in the same battle where his photograph had been taken. She'd been a medic, caught in crossfire while trying to save a wounded soldier. Marcus had held her as she died, watched the light fade from eyes that looked so much like his own. Always brooding about Elena, he said, which was true enough. Jasmine studied him with concern. You know she'd want you to move on, right? To find something beyond the war? I know. Marcus straightened as the council chamber doors opened and delegates began filing in. He scanned faces automatically, looking for threats, until his gaze caught on silver-white hair and amethyst eyes. Princess Aveline entered with her entourage, dressed in formal robes of deep purple and gold. She moved with practiced grace, acknowledging various dignitaries with slight nods. But as she passed where Marcus stood, her eyes flickered to his for just a moment. In that brief glance, Marcus saw recognition, curiosity, and something that made his pulse quicken. Then she was past, entering the chamber, and the doors closed behind her. Did you just make eye contact with the princess? Jasmine whispered, her voice sharp with surprise. No, Marcus lied. Marcus, I saw. Drop it, Jas. But Jasmine's suspicions were the least of his problems. Throughout the day, Marcus felt eyes on him. Not just Jasmine's concerned glances, but something else. Someone watching him with intensity that made his skin prickle. During the lunch recess, as Marcus stood in the corridor while delegates mingled in an adjacent hall, a Volturian man approached him. He was tall, even for their species, with silver hair shot through with blackened eyes that held the coldness of deep space. His robes marked him as high nobility. You are Marcus Chun, yes? A man said in flawless English. Marcus tensed. I am. Can I help you? I am Lord Corvin, chief advisor to the royal family. His gaze was assessing, measuring. I wanted to meet the human who so impressed our princess during yesterday's unfortunate mix-up with the Rue assignments. Marcus's blood ran cold. They knew. Of course they knew. It was an honest mistake, Lord Corvin. I apologize if I caused any... The princess reported the incident herself, Corvin interrupted smoothly. She was quite insistent that no fault be attributed to you. Quite insistent indeed. His eyes narrowed slightly. Tell me, what did you discuss during your brief encounter? Every instinct screamed danger. Marcus chose his words carefully. Very little. I apologized for the intrusion. She graciously accepted and directed me to the correct wing. That's all. That's all, Corvin repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe a word. How strange, then, that she seemed distracted this morning. That her focus during negotiations has been, shall we say, divided. I wouldn't know anything about that. Corvin stepped closer, lowering his voice. I have served the royal family for 30 years. I watched Princess Aveline grow from a child into the woman she is today. I know when something has shifted in her world. His gaze bored into Marcus. You are that shift. I don't know why, and I don't know how, but I will be watching you, human. If you do anything to compromise her position, her safety, or her duty to her people, you will discover that not all Volturians are as forgiving as our princess. The threat was clear. Marcus met Corvin's gaze steadily. I have no intention of compromising anything. I'm just a bodyguard doing his job. See that you remain just that. Corvin turned and walked away, his robes swirling with theatrical menace. Marcus exhaled slowly, his heart hammering. This was getting complicated fast. He needed to avoid Aveline, needed to forget what she'd told him, needed to finish this summit and return to Earth before. Marcus? He turned to find Princess Aveline standing in a small alcove off the main corridor. She must have slipped away from the reception. She looked at him with those impossibly expressive eyes, and Marcus felt his resolve crumbling. "Your Highness," he said formally, glancing around, "you shouldn't be here alone. I needed to speak with you." She stepped closer, her voice low. "I heard Corvin approached you." "What did he say?" "He warned me to stay away from you." Pain flashed across her face. "He has no right." "He has every right," Marcus interrupted gently. "He's protecting you. And he's right to be concerned." "Concerned about what?" "That I might actually speak to a human as an equal? That I might see past the centuries of prejudice and suspicion? Concerned that his princess might be making decisions based on emotion rather than duty," Marcus said. "Concerned that whatever this is between us," he gestured between them, "could become a problem." Aveline's luminescence flickered, a sign of emotional distress in her species. "Is that what you think? That I'm being emotional and foolish?" "I think you're compassionate and brave," Marcus said honestly. "But I also think Corvin has a point. You're the heir to a throne. I'm a soldier with no family, no prospects, no future beyond whatever mission I'm assigned next. You keeping my photograph, what you told me last night, it was beautiful. But it can't be anything more than that." "Why not?" Aveline demanded, and there was fire in her voice now. "Because our species are different? Because it's politically inconvenient? Because people like Corvin say it's impossible? Because I'm not worth the cost to you," Marcus said quietly. "Your advisor is right to protect you from complications, from distractions, from me." Aveline stared at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand. That photograph wasn't just symbolic. Looking at your face, knowing your story, it changed everything for me. It made me question the war, question my own hatred, question everything I'd been taught about your people. You made me want peace when everyone around me wanted vengeance." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Then I'm glad I could help, even unknowingly. But that doesn't change reality. You have responsibilities, a kingdom depending on you. And his voice cracked slightly, "I can't be the reason you compromise any of that. What if I want to?" Aveline whispered, "What if I'm tired of duty being the only thing that matters? What if I want to make choices for myself, not just for my kingdom?" Before Marcus could respond, voices echoed from the main corridor. The recess was ending. Aveline glanced toward the sound, then back at him, her expression torn between duty and desire. "I have to go," she said. "But Marcus, this conversation isn't over. I won't let fear and propriety decide everything for me. Not anymore." She swept away before he could argue, leaving Marcus alone in the alcove with his heart in chaos. He wanted to believe her, wanted to imagine a world where an alien princess and a broken soldier could somehow build something together. But he'd seen too much, lost too much, to trust in fairy tales. The afternoon session dragged on eternally. Marcus stood at his post, trying not to think about amethyst eyes and warm hands, and the way Aveline had looked at him like he mattered. The afternoon session dragged on eternally. Marcus stood at his post, trying not to think about amethyst eyes and warm hands, and the way Aveline had looked at him like he mattered. Like he was more than just a weapon with a pulse. When the day finally ended and the delegates dispersed, Marcus made his way back toward his quarters, exhausted in body and soul. But as he turned down a quiet corridor, he found his path blocked by Lord Corvin once again. "We need to talk," the advisor said. "Privately." They ended up in a small meeting room, empty except for the two of them. Corvin sealed the door and turned to Marcus with an expression that was somehow both stern and sad. "I know about the photograph," Corvin said without preamble. Marcus's stomach dropped. "I don't, please. Don't insult my intelligence." Corvin walked to the window, looking out at the 3 moons. "I've known about it for years." I'm the one who first brought Princess Aveline those reconnaissance reports, hoping to strengthen her resolve for the war. Instead, she fixated on one image. Your image. She kept requesting updates on you, information about your missions, reports of your actions. I thought it was morbid fascination. I didn't realize until recently that it was something far more dangerous. It's not, Marcus started, but Corvin held up a hand. Let me finish. Princess Aveline is the heart of our kingdom. She is beloved by our people, respected by our military, trusted by our allies. When she speaks of peace, they listen, because she lost 2 brothers to this war. She has earned her authority through pain and perseverance. Corvin turned to face Marcus. If our people discovered that she harbors feelings for a human soldier, it would destroy her credibility. It would turn her into a traitor in their eyes, someone who chose the enemy over her own kind. Then there's no problem, Marcus said firmly, even as his heart ached. Because nothing is going to happen between us. I won't let it. Corvin studied him for a long moment. You care for her already, don't you? Even after one conversation. Marcus wanted to lie, but found he couldn't. It doesn't matter what I feel. I won't be the reason she loses everything she's worked for. That's not your decision to make, Corvin said quietly. Aveline is strong-willed. If she has decided she wants to explore whatever connection she feels with you, she will find a way. The question is whether you will help me protect her from herself. What are you asking? Leave, Corvin said bluntly. Request a transfer back to Earth. Cite personal reasons, medical issues, anything. Remove yourself from this situation before it spirals into something that will hurt her far worse than a broken heart. Marcus felt like he'd been punched. Leave. Run away. Protect Aveline by disappearing from her life before they could build anything real. It was logical, sensible, the right thing to do, but it was also cowardly. I can't, Marcus heard himself say. Can't or won't? Both. Marcus met Corvin's gaze steadily. You're right that I care about her. You're right that I'm probably the worst possible complication she could have right now. But running away won't solve anything. She'll still have that photograph. She'll still wonder what might have been. And he took a shaking breath. I've spent 5 years running from everything that made me human. From feeling, from connecting, from hoping. I lost my sister in this war. I lost pieces of myself I'll never get back. And then I walked into a room and found that someone saw me, really saw me, when I thought I was invisible. I'm not throwing that away without at least trying to understand what it means. Corvin's expression remained unreadable. Even if it destroys her? I won't let it destroy her, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. If this becomes a problem, if it threatens her position, I'll walk away. But until then, I'm not going to treat her feelings, or mine, like there's something shameful that needs to be hidden. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then, surprisingly, Corvin's stern expression softened slightly. You're either very brave or very foolish, the advisor said. Possibly both. He walked to the door, then paused. There is a private garden on the eastern side of the palace. The princess walks there most evenings after dinner. It is secluded, away from prying eyes. If someone were to be there, they might have a conversation without being observed. Marcus's heart skipped. Are you? I am telling you nothing, Corvin interrupted firmly. Except that if you hurt her, if you betray the trust she has placed in you, I will ensure you regret it for whatever remains of your life. Am I clear? Crystal clear. Corvin nodded once and left, leaving Marcus alone with a revelation that changed everything. The advisor who should have been his enemy had just given him permission tacit. Deniable, but real to see Aveline again. Marcus looked at his hands, scarred from years of combat, and wondered if they were steady enough to hold something as fragile as hope. as impossible as love. That evening, as 3 moons rose over the Valtorian palace, Marcus made his way to the eastern gardens. He found them easily a riot of alien flowers and colors that had no names in human languages. Pathways of luminescent stone, and in the center, a fountain that sang with water and starlight. And there, sitting on a bench beside the fountain, was Princess Aveline. She looked up as he approached, and the smile that lit her face was worth every risk, every complication, every impossibility that lay ahead. "You came," she said softly. "I came," Marcus confirmed, sitting beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Then Aveline reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Tell me about your sister," she said gently. "The one you lost at Kredos." And somehow, sitting in an alien garden beneath unfamiliar moons, holding the hand of a princess who kept his photograph like a promise, Marcus found himself talking. About Elena, about the war, about all the pieces of himself he thought he'd lost forever. And Aveline listened, her hand never leaving his. Her presence a balm to wounds he'd thought would never heal. Neither of them noticed Lord Corvin watching from a distant window, his expression troubled but resigned. Neither of them saw the other figures moving in the shadows. Eyes recording, minds calculating. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than either of them knew.